So I threw this post up onto Instagram, and then I also screen capped it and threw it into my Discord. And yeah, a substantial amount of people responded. So here's the first ever Q&A on this channel. I probably won't do them that often, but yeah, if you guys have any other questions or things like that, put them down in the comments of this video, because if I ever do another Q&A, I'm probably going to look at the comments of this video first. But yeah, let's start with the Discord ones. I think the Discord ones kind of turned into like video requests, because I'm normally asking people in my Discord like what kind of videos would you like to see, so it kind of turned into that. I think some longer answers on production topics, arrangement for example. You do a lot of shorter recreations, would be interesting maybe to see how you approach the full song. My 2 cents. Yeah, it definitely would be interesting. Here's the thing, I would say a majority of the traction that my channel grew was from these like recreation videos where I like recreate a specific song from a specific artist, and they're okay, but I'm gonna be honest, they're just a lot of work. Like, they're a lot of work. Like, the Harry Styles video was a good, like, 3 hours of just, like, making the track before I even turn it on the camera. And then I like to edit my videos pretty concisely. I don't really like to drag on topics too long, so I end up removing a lot of material that I don't think is, like, crucial to get the point across. So for every, like, 10-minute video or 12-minute video you see on this channel, the raw file for that video is probably, like, an hour long, and it takes, like, a good hour to get that done. And then there's the thumbnail, the SEO, the description, trying to come up with a title that is working well on YouTube. So it's like all of that is already what goes into a single recreation video. So like having that take even longer is like, I don't know, it's kind of a hard ask. I only have like 1 day a week dedicated to content because I am a freelancer. YouTube is not my full-time thing. But yeah, I get what you're talking about, because I kind of haven't really done a whole lot of like full song length arrangement stuff. And there is some stuff from a production and songwriting standpoint that you get into with like the full length of a song that you don't get if you're just doing like a pre-chorus and a chorus, or a verse and a chorus. So I'll try to see if I can get some more stuff like that in there. It would be neat to see a vocal production video that goes in depth on your effects chain. I know there's a lot of stuff out there like that, but still, it might be worthwhile to do some highlights on that. I think I will probably be doing more videos in the future where I actually walk through productions that I have done for clients. I just put out, at the time of recording this, a video for a song that I did for Brent Keanu called I Don't Mind, and everybody loved that video. Like, it did it really well, and so I'm probably gonna do a little bit more stuff like that. Most of my videos for the past year have been me creating instrumental tracks, so yeah, I think the vocal production side is probably lacking a bit. But it's also kind of hard to know what to do, because like I'm constantly changing my vocal chain. Like, I will find a tutorial from somebody who has a vocal chain that I like, and then I'll take it, but then I'll replace some plugins because maybe I like a certain multi-band compressor more than the one that they use in the video. Maybe I'll move the band around a little bit, and then I'll just make like a bunch of tiny little tweaks like that, to the point where like in like a couple of months, there's like a V4 version of that vocal chain that has almost nothing to do with like the original chain that I found. So it's almost like doing a studio tour when you like just move into a place where you're just like, okay, I know that this is gonna kind of be shifting around for a bit, so I don't want to do a tour on it right now, but eventually I will. Because there's also like a bunch of stuff like vocal effects or chops and stuff like that that I haven't really gone into as much. Vocal editing too. I would do a vocal editing video. In the meantime, you can just watch this one from Austin Hull, because if I do eventually do a vocal editing video, it will be very similar to that, with maybe some like workflow alterations that are unique to me. But yeah, I feel like Austin did a pretty comprehensive version of it. But yeah, in the meantime, I'll just do a quick top down and describe it. I use Reaper to edit all my vocals. Ableton does not have ARA2 support, so I love using Reaper. It makes everything way faster. I just import a backing track, all the comped vocals, and then I throw Melodyne on all of it, and you can just move multiple vocals in like the same direction and just like hard tune stuff as like a big stack, and it makes things really quick. And then once I go through and edit all my vocals with that, I'll throw on like some light meta tune from Slate, like on like one of the lighter presets, and then I'll normally hit save as on that project, render all of that tuning on top of it, and then I'll go back in with Melodyne and do the same thing again with. And so when you can edit vocals with ARA2 support and you have Melodyne, like the big version, and Vocaline, I feel like you get really fast results with stuff like that. All right, now to Instagram. How much music theory would you say is enough for a producer to be able to actually properly produce? I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to know. I mean, Deadmau5 notoriously doesn't know how to play piano, but he's like the biggest EDM producer in the world. I would say whatever knowledge you have right now is enough for you to get started with. And if you are noticing roadblocks, learn small bits of theory as you encounter them. Because what I've noticed is a lot of people will sort of prescribe these large swaths of music theory. And the problem you run into when you do that is you start to just see theory as something that needs to be learned and mastered. Whereas like even people like Jacob Collier, they're like finding new stuff all the time that's just like exciting to them. So I would say start out with musical genres that you know you like. So if you're into math rock, look up some math rock guitar tutorials and just start there and sort of pick it up as you are producing stuff. I think a lot of people get scared of music theory because they think there's like some magic keys to the kingdom that they just don't know about, and they're making bad music and they don't know it yet. But yeah, I went to music college, and most of the discussions that we had about like theory were like, how do you arrange this chord progression with this melody for like a 4-part string section, and then you notate that out on paper, which is like cool stuff, but I didn't really get that much out of that. Or I should say I don't really use any of that in like my day-to-day life here. Stephen King talked about in his memoir that if you feel like your vocabulary isn't that good, or it's like you don't have a big enough lexicon, just use what you have right now, write as much as you can, and then you will continue to expand your lexicon as you continue to read other books. So that's what I would say for that. Mainly favorite plugins you like to use while mixing, mastering, and why. I actually did a full video on like all the plugins that I use. The video is like a year old, but it's mainly up to date. I'm not really somebody who buys new plugins that often, if I'm being honest. I only recently bought FabFilter 3. Not because it's bad. I love it. It's now like my go-to EQ, but it's just I take forever to buy stuff. Some ones off the top of my head, a lot of stock Ableton stuff. I use the stock Ableton EQ, the stock Ableton compressor, the stock Ableton limiter almost every single day. RVox is a really good one. It's really simple. Like if you need to track something with a vocalist and you're just like, okay, one plugin, just throw it on there, clamp it down, and it gets things at a good level. For mastering, I've been really loving the Leapwing Dyne 1. There's some presets in there from Bob Katz, who is an amazing mastering engineer, and he has a couple of presets that are like parallel multiband compression that you can just like lift up, and it almost acts as like MV2 from Waves. It's like an upward compressor, but it's like multiband, and it's a really easy way to sort of get like a big fullness out of a mix, but also like keep things pretty transparent. Standard Clip is another good one. That was the plugin that like made me start enjoying clippers on a mastering chain, because you can just bring it down until you're just clipping like the peaks of your drums and like leveling out the signal a little bit, which really makes it easy to boost it into the limiter and get even more volume. Whereas I feel like when you boost really pokey drums into like a gain reduction circuit, like a limiter, you start to get a lot more of like the mix like ducking every time a snare hits. How to balance work life and social life. I mean, for me, I feel like I've just been like combining the two as much as I can. I try to have friends come in every once in a while and just make stuff for fun. I also feel like having set hours as a freelancer is really important, just because like, yeah, there's a really big temptation to just always be working all the time. I think probably the best advice I can get for work-life balance is read Essentialism by Greg McKeown, because there are a lot of people who just kind of need to cut stuff out. The big work-life balance thing is like, very few people I know who are talking about like struggling with work-life balance are struggling with like, oh, my life is taking over my work too much. It's almost always like your work is taking over your life. Sometimes that means reducing your time on certain things like YouTube or Netflix or the time killer stuff, and just being intentional of like, hey, I'm gonna reach out to friends and like get coffee, or I'm gonna have something planned to do in the evenings every night. Like that's a big thing for me, is I have reminders on my phone to reach out to a friend to get coffee with them. I think like 2 or 3 times a week. I have that reminder set up so I can like reach out to somebody, because yeah, it's something I need. I cannot be in this room by myself all the time and feel good. I need to like go be around people at some point. And then my schedule is really messed up. I found out that I am a late sleeper chronotype, so that means I wake up later in the day around like 9 a.m. But then I also go to bed later story at like 3 a.m. And it's even though it's 6 hours, I feel great doing that. But yeah, it's like kind of a wonky schedule. It's like a 3-hour shift overall. And so just trying to make sure after being in the studio by myself for like most of the day, that around 6-ish, I can like go be with somebody or go do something somewhere. So sometimes that's hanging out with people at my church. Sometimes that's just trying to find a local concert to go to. Just anything, really. I feel like it's just getting out. But I would say that's mainly a thing for me, just because like there is a temptation to just be like, okay, I've worked by myself all day long. It's 6 p.m. Let me just watch YouTube until I like fall asleep. Long-term goals and dreams, professional and personal. Long-term goal, personal, is to just get a dog or get in a living situation where I can have a dog. I've wanted a dog for a long time. Yeah, living situation has never really worked out for that. So next place I move, it's going to be like dog friendly. Goals, I'll just break it down into facets of my life. So goals for this channel, I would love it, if I'm going to be honest, transition away from the song recreation stuff. I get that that is why most people are here, but I would really enjoy moving it away from something like that. Because the thing that I've noticed, and there's this really good video by Doug where he talks about how to really grow as a content creator. And the thing that he talks about is you need to have your two skills mixed together in everything that you do in your content. And for me, the two things that I really value more than anything else is, one, craft. Like I love getting in and like examining the craft of songwriting or the craft of production or the storytelling side. Like I love getting into the nitty gritty of just like, oh, well, what if we move this one thing a little over to the side? What if we do this one thing different? And oh my gosh, now it sounds so much better. Like I love that. I've been addicted to that since I was like 16, and I still will mess around with that to the point where I should probably go to bed, but I'm getting so stoked on it. So I love that side. But then the other thing that I love is like connection. I love connecting with people. I get really messed up if I'm doing everything by myself all the time. And as great as those track recreations are for my channel, and how on some level I'm always probably going to have to do like one or two of them every once in a while, there is a level of just like, there is no connection with that content. It is me just recreating a track from scratch. You know, compare that to the series I've been doing recently where I've been producing songs from people in my Discord who will just submit their demos and be like, hey, what do you want to do with this? And that's been really fun because A, it's a lot more freeing. It's a lot more creative. I'm not as restricted into like, okay, I need to make this guitar tone sound like this band Camino guitar tone. I can be like creative and do whatever I want and actually like flex the craft side a bit, but also I get to like connect with people. It's cool to be like, okay, what is it like to like hear their version of this song and then sort of do my own version of it? That's really exciting, and I really love doing that. And I would love to do more stuff in the future that is more of the craft and connection side of it. Eventually, I would love to do live streams where I just start a live stream and I do a song start to end. Like I sit with a blank session, and by the end of the stream, there is a finished song that is mixed and mastered being uploaded to DistroKid, because I have done those before, or at least that routine. And I feel like in a live streaming context, that would just be really cool. Like either that or doing something that is like a Doug or a Ludwig or a Small Ant type content, but a little bit more on the music producer side. Like I have an idea of like, what if I sampled me playing Elden Ring and used the samples from that to make an instrumental, like stuff like that. I would love for the YouTube channel to be a little bit more fun. Right now, it's just kind of at a point where this is kind of my main way of bringing in clients for my freelancing work. So I kind of need to prioritize that right now, but long term, I'd like it to be that. In terms of my production business, I would love it if 5-6 years from now, this is honestly like the dream that I've had for a while, is having like a studio house, like a house that functions as a house, but like in the basement, there's just like a fully decked out studio. We can track live drums if we want. It's a creative space. It's a vibe. And if somebody wanted to hypothetically work with me, they could fly in, stay there for like a week, and we could just hunker down and like either make a few songs or an album. And I live in Washington State, and so there's a lot of cool like middle of nowhere places that you can really find here. And I think it would be cool to be like, okay, here's this farm in like Tenino, Washington, but there's like a fully decked out studio. And so you can just go there and it's almost like a retreat or just like a getaway where it's like, okay, the cell tower's not that that great here and the internet's not great, but we're locked in here, and so let's make some music. So I think something like that would be really cool. When it rains, is it drops on your head or does the whole thing get wet? Neither. My head just goes. Best way to promote/position yourself as a producer to work with mostly remote clients. So here, let me answer this in like two parts. One is just like general producer advice. The other is like mainly for remote people. So the best way to promote yourself as a producer is to just kind of make as much content as you can showing who you are and what you do. So like YouTube is like a long-term like sort of growth platform, but I feel like most producers would benefit from like trying to put in like 2 or 3 years towards like a good YouTube channel, because it really pays a lot of dividends in terms of like getting eyeballs on the work that you do, but also just like Instagram Reels, TikTok, all that stuff. Like make content where you are displaying what you can do for somebody else, and like almost do the equivalent of like those power wash videos on TikTok, which is guys just like on some level, if they are a power washing company, if they just take that video and run that as an ad in their local area, they are going to get business. So like almost think of it that way. I'm just like, all right, I want to make content where somebody can point at that and be like, that I want them to do that for me, and like have it be that simple. I know there's other approaches to content you can do where you're just like, well, make stuff that they think would be helpful, but I've tried doing that and I haven't noticed it translating as much. Like I tried doing like songwriting tips on TikTok for a long time and they did really well, but I got a lot of people being like, do you have a songwriting course or something like that? So I think just going for like, this is what I do as a producer, niching down into a genre can be helpful. But at the same time, I feel like when you're early on, it's kind of hard to know what genre you do best. So at the very start, I would say don't worry about making a specific genre, just like take any work that you can. And then the remote part, I mean, I don't know. For me, I never really emphasized the remote part in like marketing that much. I probably should more, but I mean, I have content where I'm showing myself producing, and there's always like a web form where people can like find me and work with me, and it's on the web, so like anybody can find it. And so 90% of like the remote clients that I have just found me that way. I've worked with people from Singapore, from Amsterdam, multiple from Canada, multiple from California, one from Spain. Like it's just people find it. And so as long as you have like a framework to like bring people in and take care of them as remote clients, you're pretty good. And honestly, most of that is just like having like a Zoom and an Audio Mover subscription. And that's basically it. Would love to see your project tracking process. And yes, it is very business nerdy. In terms of project tracking, I do very minimal tracking as of right now, just because every time I have tried building out a system to like keep track of projects, they always just end up being more complicated to use than they should be. I think probably the best version of that I tried was just having something in Notion where it's like, okay, here's the person's name, here's the project name, here's when the project started, and then here's when it ended. And keeping track of stuff like that, I feel like has been pretty chill. Like I used to have like a bigger document that would like keep track of like every little detail, but I just felt like it got more complicated to use than it was worth. And so I feel like as long as you even have like just sticky notes or a whiteboard, it's just like, here are the active projects that I have, and you're keeping track of like those artists after a project so that eventually you can like reach out again, maybe. I feel like that's the most important thing, is just making sure you don't like accidentally forget that you worked with somebody. I used to have Pipedrive and I used to manage it that way, but Pipedrive was like $50 a month, and so it was not worth it for me at all. The only time where it is different and I am like trying to like keep more track of it is when there's like a set deadline that they know that they need the project done by. And that's normally something that is talked about like first call, like, do you have a specific date that this needs to be done by? And if they say yes on that introduction call, I sit down and we're like, okay, how many weeks do we have until this needs to be done? And we will just plan out like, okay, next week that's going to be our pre-production meeting, and then we're going to have max like 3 like production meetings, and then just like working backwards from like how many days you have to work on it. So that's the only time where I get like really in the nitty-gritty about it, and that's more just to make sure that we like get it done on time. How do you manage your schedule, balancing all this, plus leave wiggle room for being a human? So the biggest thing is to actually schedule stuff. I'm using my calendar. I'm checking it every single day, and all my stuff like Google Calendar and the Apple Calendar on my phone, they're all synced up, and that's all synced up with Calendly. So when people are like booking calls, they're only grabbing slots that I have designated. Like I am okay with somebody booking a call in this slot. For tasks that I know are going to be longer, like the content-based stuff, that is normally just I've blocked off Friday, and that Friday is only for like content stuff, and I'm not producing for anybody. So blocking it out in one day like that, I feel like it helped me a lot. But then also, like I said with the essentialism thing before, is like you have to minimize stuff if it's getting too crazy. Another book that I think is helpful for people is Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Work Week. There's a chapter in there that's almost like worth buying the book for. It's called E for Elimination. And yeah, you have to go through that every once in a while and just be like, okay, 80-20 rule. More than likely, the good results that I'm having, 80% of them are coming from 20% of the work that I'm doing. So how can I narrow in on that and get more of that? But then also 80% of the stress is most likely coming from like 20% of what I'm doing. So how can I like cut that out? And I've had to do that with some stuff that was like really not fun to say no to. Like there were several like sync licensing opportunities that popped up, and I had to say no because it was like generating so much stress in my life to just try to say yes to it and like get stuff done that it wasn't worth it. In terms of like leaving wiggle room to be a human, I think mainly for me that just comes from like I said before, scheduling time with other people. Also, try to have hobbies outside of music, specifically hobbies that like go into like different realms. So like I am a nerd. One of mine is just comic books. I genuinely love like just getting like a thick Hellboy comic, going somewhere on my off day and just getting lost in it for like an hour. It's like really refreshing, and like it gives me a break from music world, which I think if you're a freelancer, if there's anything that you're gonna fall into making music your entire world. Like for a lot of freelance producers, originally production and producing music and making music, that was our wiggle room to be human. That was like our artistic expression. And now it is our job. And so now you need to find something else to be human at. How far back do you use face wash because bald? Like at what point does it transition? I know this is a joke, but honestly, I don't know. I went bald in like my early 20s, and I kid you not, to this day, whenever I'm doing like a facial scrub thing, sometimes I'll catch myself and it will just be here and then I'll stop. What bus comps do you like besides SSL bus comp? I mean, there's a lot of good ones out there right now. The main thing is just finding one that has like the character that you like. So honestly, virtual bus compressor, the Red from Slate Digital, that's been like my go-to recently. I stopped using it because I was like, oh, I gotta use like different compressors, because I think that was like the first one that I tried. But lately I've been like, okay, it adds like a nice like character to stuff. And I have used Katalnikov from TDR, and that one's good, but I feel like it's really clean and it's good for getting like a controlled feel. Like if you're trying to do something like hyper clean and get the compressor to move exactly the way you want to, that's like the best one. But now I'm at a point where I almost prefer a bus compressor that isn't clean. I prefer it to actually have like a little bit of character to it. So virtual bus compressor is good. Kive makes some cool ones. Shout out to Johnny and Isaiah from Kive. There's one included in the Arturia bundle. I think Native Instruments even makes one that's like pretty decent. So yeah, there's a lot of options. Dealing with client contracts, upfront payment, that type of stuff. I mean, I've gotten to a point where I can just ask for an upfront payment and it's like not a big deal. You know, like be willing to work with people. There've been some projects where like I've really wanted to work with a person, and so I'm like, okay, we can just divide this into like multiple payments and it's not a big deal. In terms of contracts, I'm gonna be honest, I don't use contracts. I do use proposals. I use proposals for every project that I do, and that's mainly just so there can be like expectations set, and like you can list out all the details of like how long is the project gonna take, what services are included, what's not included. You can use a template, but then like make it custom to like the project that you've talked about with the person, and you can explicitly write out like how much you're being charged. If you're splitting up payments, you can define like how many payments are going to be there. And yeah, I feel like that does a majority of the job that a contract would do, because I think the biggest thing is contracts are like a commitment thing. Like again, if you have a contract that you're using and like you feel good about it, I'm not saying stop using it. Honestly, I feel like most of the time contracts are very rarely for actual like legal protection, and in the terms of like production, they're mainly used for like expectation management and defining deliverables and things like that. So I have like a list of like, you get this master in this format and all of these other formats, you get backing tracks, project timeline is probably going to be about these months. And yeah, that's basically worked well for me up to this point. I feel like the only time where I would get a little bit more stingy about like, okay, we need a contract for this, is if I was doing a song where I was getting a percentage and like that was like part of the deal, because making sure that that is written in contract in like a legally binding sense, I feel like that's pretty important. But yeah, in most cases, I'm just not using contracts. Again, don't quote me on that. If you say yes to a bad project, that's on you, not me. But yeah, that is all all the questions. Again, if you guys have any other questions you'd like to ask, put them in the comments down below. If I ever do another one of these, I'm probably going to come back to this guy and look for some of those. But yeah, that's been this video. So I'll see you guys next week.